Hi everybody, welcome back. Dave Forrest here. I'm going to be going over the final stages of finishing the Sherman. So in today's episode, we're going to look at doing finishing the mud on the top of the turret and on the back of the tank. If you'll notice, there's now tracks on the tank. So I've done this side here. I've used the kit tracks, and we'll go over what I did there. Finally, we'll look at adding. I think last time we talked about adding some stains on the front. We'll show you adding some grease stains and whatnot, just to add a little bit of interest to certain areas of the running gear, and maybe some fuel stains on the top of the tank as well. So we'll get everything set up, and we'll get to it. Just to go over the materials we're going to be using in today's episode. So again, the same three pigments that we've been using all along. Again, it's important to be consistent, so we're going to continue to use the mix of the light dust from MIG, the dark earth, and the Europe earth. I've got that mixed up in a little container here. For the stains, there's a lot of products you can use for oil and grease stains. And what I've elected to do for this particular build, I've used a mix of three items from the Wilder range of products. So they have a real nice diesel effect product here. So this is kind of a dark black, there's almost a bit of a blue tinge to it, which is a really nice color. They also have a product called Old Grease, which is a little bit more brownish in color. And to give it some gloss and some shininess, I use the Murky Water. This is a fantastic product for creating a wet effect, and I really like it. It's looks horrible and it smells even worse, but it does a really nice job on the vehicle. And then for blending, we're going to use the matte effects thinner from Abteilung 502. The reason why I might want to use this when I'm blending is that there is a matte additive. You do have to keep shaking it up though. So just to make sure there aren't any glossy finishes or tide marks on the vehicle, this does a nice job of keeping it matte. Of course, we'll use the good traditional odorless thinners for cleaning up and for mixing anything. And then we're also going to introduce some oils here. And the paints I've got are off camera somewhere. But I've got, again, two paints from the Abteilung 502 range. I've got the mud and a dry dirt range. So we'll look at using these, blending these, and then adding some of the pigments to create some of the effects. So we'll do the tracks first. So I'll get the tracks off this side of the vehicle, and we'll get right to it. So the tracks. So I've used again, this is right from the beginning. This has always been an out-of-the-box build. So the intent was to use the plastic band tracks that came with the vehicle, and what I've done is I've glued them together per the instructions. And the nice thing about the Tamiya tracks is that they do respond well to glue. And I painted them, I airbrushed them initially kind of a lighter brown, and then I hand painted the rubber parts of the tracks kind of almost a brown black type of color. Now, looking at this, you really can't tell there's a difference. And in hindsight, with everything that we're going to do to this, probably really didn't have to do that. So I think going forward, if I was to do this again, I'd probably just paint it the one color and be done with it. But now that we have that on there, and I've used some AK paints. I used their I don't have it with me unfortunately, but I did use their track and wheel set, and I painted I think dark tracks and satin rubber, or satin black rather, for the tracks. But again, there's such almost no difference in the color here. You'd be hard pressed to see it. So now that the paints had a chance to fully cure, at least a good 24 hours. What I like to do now is just go after it with pigment. So we'll work on the external face of the track. Now bear in mind, these particular tracks, these parts here are all metal, and the teeth are metal, and the parts here in the middle are all black. Now I think there were some versions of the Sherman where this would be all steel, but for this particular version I'm assuming it's all black. Again, I may not be historically terribly accurate, but that's part of the fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a lot of pigment on an old frayed brush, and I'm just going to work it in there like that. So if you're doing this, you probably want to do it on a towel or piece of tissue paper or something, because this will create quite a mess, as you can see. So I'm just going at it, just randomly, working section by section. Now, once I've gotten to a point where I think I've done enough, I'll just take my handy applicator here of X28 thinner. Again, we've been using this as a fixer throughout the build. And just with surgical precision, just start fixing the pigment on there. The nice thing about using this applicator is you can get really, and I haven't refilled this since the start of the build, so all of the fixing that we've done is really because of the precise nature of the applicator here. We really haven't used a lot, which is nice. Just work it in. Now, if you don't have access to one of these, you could use a smaller pipette, but you're gonna, by nature, you're gonna end up applying a little bit more. But this will work. I've used this in the past too, just as well. I'll just get this stuff fixed on. You just have to touch it and let the capillary action just pull the fixer into the pigment and into all the crevice between the tracks and the track links and pins on the side, and the gaps between the various individual links. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this with the dryer, and let's see what this gives us. So I've just blasted this with a hair dryer just to dry out the fixer, and here's what we have left. So you get a nice random effect of dust and dirt and mud in the tracks here. So you could do one of two things. You could say, yeah, I'm good with this, or if you wanted to, you could hit it again with some more pigment. So I might just do another coat, and all I'm doing is just, again, picking up a bunch of pigment, our mix of the three colors that we've been using all through the build, and I'm just going to continue to work this in, like so. And you can see there's a nice variety, right? So there's some tracks that have a little bit more mud and dust, or I guess pigment simulating mud and dust, and others are a little bit cleaner. And I think that random effect is nice. I think that looks good. I think it's realistic. So we don't want to undo too much of that. There may be some that I just want to add a little bit more to, like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this with the pigment, I'm going to hit this with the fixer. I'm going to dry it again, and then I'm going to repeat this process for the entire length. And then what I'll do, actually, while I have this going now, you got to do the other side of the tracks too, right? Because you would get mud on these as well. There. And it's the same thing. You just kind of, what you want to try and do is really, now, the inner part of the track here is where the road wheels are gonna come into contact. And typically, if you look at real vehicles, there is a bit of a worn area here where there isn't a lot of mud and dust. So you don't, like where on the external part, you're kind of leaving this caked on. Now we'll talk about the raised areas here in a moment. We'll come back and address that. But on the inside, you're really just trying to work it in. And you see how here it's worked into the gaps between the various sections of the track. That's exactly what we're looking for. Because constant motion and contact with the road wheels. Now again, the road wheels on the Sherman, and this particular Sherman, were rubber as well. So these things would wear pretty well, and they would clean off a lot of whatever mud and dirt accumulation you would have in there. But I think it's a good effect. They're really trying to work it into the, there we go, nice. Work it into the teeth, to the links here. Now remember, these are the metal part. And again, you're just trying to get pigment and just trying to get it to maybe build up a little bit in some areas. Right? So same thing. Going to hit this with the fixer, going to hit that with the fixer, dry it, going to continue that all the way around, and then we'll proceed to the next step of the weathering process. Okay. So I've finished going after this with more pigment and more fixer on both sides. And sometimes what I'll do is, even when there's some areas here that are still a little bit wet, I'll go after, still have the X20 hasn't fully dried, or the X20A, and I'll just, even while it's still wet, go after it and just blow it off, just to make sure we got good coverage. So I think we've done a nice job of getting mud and dirt caked into. Every time you see something you missed, you can just keep, anyway, you keep working this in until you're happy, until you're satisfied. It's not a problem. But you can see the general effect here, right? So we've really muddied these up, and we've got a nice random effect over these. But now we have to, I mentioned before that the inner parts of the tracks here are all rubber on this particular model, and they would wear, and certainly the inside of the tracks would wear as well. So what I like to use is, to simulate that, I'll use MIG's black pigment. And how I apply that, very simply, not a lot of high tech here, is I will use the old Mark I finger, and I will dip my finger into the pigment. Don't get a lot on, dab off any excess, and just gently rub along the high parts of the rubber track, and you can see that between here and here there's a difference, right? So now, and I'm not really taking pigment off, so when you apply the dirt mixture, you can see here on the raised parts of the tracks, it's setting, it's on there. And all I'm doing is I'm just covering that with black, just to simulate the fact that the rubber on the track, the high parts of the rubber on the tracks would wear off. Just like if you look at your tires, and if you go through mud after a while, if you drive on clean pavement, that the upper part of the tire tread, the parts that stay proud of the tire and the grooves, will be a little bit darker, right? And you can see that even though this is black, it's not too stark a finish, and I think it's just about the right color. So just work your finger in there, pick up a little bit more, and just to so you're not dropping gobs of black pigment on the middle there, or the inside of the tracks, the non-raised portions rather. You can see it's just as easy as that. That's all you need to do. Just work that finger in there, and just rub it over the raised parts. And you can see, like here, there's maybe not. That's fine. That's a good random finish. I'm not going to go back and touch that. I'm happy with the randomness there. It makes it look more realistic in my mind. And you may have to go over it just a couple of times just to make sure. Now, maybe what I'm doing here is I think I'm picking up pigment from what I dropped before, so let's move to a cleaner place here. There we go. See how easy that is? Just a few swipes of the finger with the black pigment on it, and you've got a nice effect. Okay, so I think that about does it for the outer tread. Now let's, for the inner tread, do the same type of thing, but you're just working it in the middle here. Let me pick up a little bit more. And again, for the same reasons, you've got rubber on rubber wear in here. So just kind of, you can see there's a nice little kind of clean area there, which is a nice effect. Exactly what we're looking for. Now you could use one of those thin sponge makeup applicators. Got a bit of a thick finger, so it's a little bit hard to get in there, but you can see nice effect. Then don't worry about getting it on the teeth here, because we'll come back and address that. Very simple. It's like almost like finger painting, finger pigmenting. And just by the, and you can see the motion of the finger here. It's kind of creating these almost like these streaks, and that's perfect. Because again, you'd have those rubber road wheels consistently in contact with the tracks, and you can see how the dust or the earth mixture has kind of worked its way into the areas between the track links. That's exactly the effect that we're looking for. Okay, so that does it for the tracks. Now the only thing we have left to do is the same type of thing. I'm just going to clean my finger off camera here, and now we're going to address the metal parts of the track. So again, the links here on the, like these little things that protrude out from the side, and of course the teeth that the sprocket grab into to propel the track forward, that's metal. So I always like to show a little bit of wear and tear on the metal parts, and it's the same process. Instead of using black, get rid of the black here, put that over here. But same thing, get the old finger in there, the old Mark I finger as I like to call it, same type of thing, and then you're just touching the outsides. All right, that's all you're doing, just like that. And then the raised part of the teeth. Now remember, on the inside in particular, we got some of that black pigment on the teeth, and I said don't worry about it. That's why you don't worry about it, because you're going to do the same thing with the metal. And I like to use this is the AK dark steel. I bought this I don't know how many years ago. I still have a lot of it left. And there's all kinds of, if you can't find the AK one, MIG makes the same type. So it's easy to get. The dark steel is a nice, realistic shine, and you can use. You can use graphite too. A lot of guys just like to use the pencil graphite, and I've done that too sometimes if I have. These are plastic band tracks, but sometimes if I'm working with metal tracks, I'll just sand part of it off just to bring the real metal through. That can be a bit of a stark finish though. Or if you're working with plastic Lincoln length tracks, they're a little bit harder, so you can get a pencil on there and do the same type of thing I'm doing here. But a pencil here, because of the soft, the pliable nature of the rubber track here, I don't think it would work quite as well. So, and this is just an excuse for me to get my fingers dirty. So again, just working it over, just the raised parts. All right, and again, you get I don't know if you can get in there, Robert, or not, but you can see there's a nice effect where you've got kind of metal metal effect on the raised parts here, where there'd be some wear and tear, and on the top of the teeth, but you still have some of the dirt and grime on the inner pockets of the tooth there, where things would naturally accumulate, right? So very nice realistic effect. So I'll just do it, and the more you kind of swipe and polish it with a finger, the shinier the effect will get. Right, so let me go pick up a little bit more. I'm gonna get home today, my wife's gonna say, "What have you been up to?" But this washes off with soap and water, so not a big deal. It's not toxic at all. Very safe to do. And you can see just going over it. Nice effect. And then we'll flip it over and then do the same thing on the other side. And you don't need a lot, as you can see. I'm just kind of picking up some of the pigment I dabbed off earlier. I'm going to go pick a little bit more up here. Like so. And just do that. Just wipe it. And it's perfect because your finger is able to get to the areas that would naturally be exposed to wear and tear, that would pull the dirt and the mud off, expose the metal underneath. And where your finger can't get would be a natural place for dirt and mud to accumulate, which would not get to. So you can see a nice effect here to the raised part of the teeth. You can see the metal being exposed. There's still dirt on the kind of the inner part of the tooth. Very easy. And then you might be able to, just kind of on the tops. All right. There you go. And there's hardly, the finger looks like it's metal, but there's hardly any pigment on it. I'm just rubbing it like that just to get it. And maybe pick a little bit more up. See. And I don't fix this. Like, there's no need, because you're just putting so much on there and it's kind of just getting kind of worked in. You don't need to fix it. Don't bother fixing it. And there you have it. And I think, I might go over a few more bits here, right? I think that looks pretty good. So you just do this to your satisfaction. And if you find that, for example, I've got too much black on here, or I've got too much of the dark steel on there, go over it again with the earth mixer that you have, fix it again, and come back and do this. So again, if you feel that you might have gotten too far on one thing, I've got too much black on there or too much of this metal color, you can go back over it and redo it, or touch up certain areas. So it's, it can be if you make a mistake, it's an iterative process to go back and fix it. It's not a big deal. There you go. And there you have a nice band track. So just to show how easy it is to get a nice effect on kit supplied rubber band tracks. Now, to be fair, this wouldn't be my first choice of tracks for this. And when I was doing the other side, as you can see here, let me move these out of the way. Usually the Sherman tracks are fairly live, but in this particular case, the track was a little bigger, so the upper part was floating. So what I had to do is I had to go in, and fortunately on the Sherman tank, you're given a nice platform to fix the track to in terms of these return, these are the rollers here, but you have a nice metal doohickey here that supports the track as well. And it's a nice flat, there's a nice bit of a flat surface there, and I'll show you on the other side. Here, and you can get some, what I did is I just got some cyano glue, some medium viscosity cyano glue in there, and then just pressed the track down, wedged in a couple of sponges to keep the pressure down on it, let it dry overnight, and there you have it. So there's a nice a bit of a track sag here. Now usually Sherman tracks are fairly live, and if the rubber band track is sized appropriately, no trouble using it as is. Probably don't have to do what I went through here. And I'm sure, for example, in some of the Dragon Sherman kits or the Tasca Sherman kits that do come with the the DS tracks for the Sherman, or the rubber, the regular rubber band tracks on the Tasca kits, that they would be sized appropriately where you wouldn't have to do this, and you get a nice live flush finish without having to fix anything down. If I wanted to do surgery on this, I probably could have to remove one track link or two track links, and I think that would have done it as well. But again, I wanted to keep this out of the box and simple, so just glue them down. So that's how the finished product looks. And we'll get that so that the light catches a little bit better. But you can see the finish of the track is consistent with what's happening on the running gear and on the side of the hull and other areas of the tank. So again, I can't stress enough when you're using colors and products, make sure you're consistent all the way through the build. Otherwise, it's going to show up, and it's going to be obvious that that there's a discrepancy there, and it's just not going to look as good. So what I'll do is I'll get this on and fix it off camera, and then from a track standpoint, we're finished. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what I did here to create some of these mud effects here on the top and on the side here, by using oils and pigments. And again, we talked about this very early on. If you're going to do a lot of mud and dirt and splashing and whatnot on the base of the tank or the running gear, you really got to kind of work that up onto the top of the tank and other areas. Not obviously not to the same degree, but you do have to work it in there because the crew would be, if the tank's in this type of environment, as the crew would get in and out, they would bring, track the dirt and mud up as they're getting into the hatches or servicing the vehicle or getting to on-vehicle storage or what have you. Or if it's seen action, from explosions or whatnot, dirt would get thrown up onto the top of the tank. So if you have a very clean top and a very dirty bottom, it doesn't quite look right to my eye. So I'll show you very easily how you can work some of that dirt and mud onto the upper surfaces of the vehicle. So we'll get to that next. So now I've put the track on the other side of the vehicle. Remember I was saying that in this particular case the track floats a little bit. So off camera I'll get some cyano glue in there and just kind of push the track down and get that to kind of sit properly. But you can see how it integrates with the rest of the weathering that we've done here, and a nice consistent finish. So that's done. So the tracks are done with the exception of just getting them to sit properly. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at getting mud on more of the horizontal surfaces of the vehicle here, up on the top of the turret and on the back here. Now I've done some work already. So you can see here that I've already applied some pigments and some oil paints to this area here, just with a stippling motion. What I'll do is I'll apply, and I'll show you all of this in just a minute or two, but just apply some oil paints, kind of work that in, work on blending them, and then on top of the oil paints, while they're still wet, go in and do some pigments and kind of work that in, and it kind of builds up a nice layered effect here that you can see on the top. So we'll do that, not everywhere, but we'll do that in a few more areas, and I'll show you how to do that. And then the other area that I did here is just one panel back here. So, and I think it's important to work, just like we did way back at the beginning with the filters, to work panel by panel. And the reason for that is that you're kind of creating, kind of a tapestry of effects, if you will, that I think, treat, and Dave Brown tells me this all the time, is like treat each separate section as if it's its own little model. So whether it's a tool or whether it's a panel on the vehicle, spend some time, do it in isolation. Mike Rinaldi talks about that too, where you're kind of working on one part of the vehicle and you're kind of building all the effects up at once, just as a bit of a proof of concept for the rest of the vehicle. So I kind of apply that when I'm doing the horizontal weathering. So we'll do a little bit more back here. And then after we finish that, I'll show you how to apply some of the oil and grease stains, and that'll take just a couple of minutes. So, okay, so let's work on the turret. So fortunately we can still pull this off the vehicle here. Set the rest of the vehicle aside so we can focus here. And what I'll do is I've used, so this is where I start to use oil paints. And I've used again, my favorite oil paints to use are the Abteilung paints. And I've got the light mud and dark mud here, appropriately named. And what I can do is I can just pick a little bit up with a fine brush, and you don't need a lot. Like I've put these on the cardboard here just to let the linseed oil bleach out a bit, so they're a little bit more concentrated. And I'll use like a tiny fraction of what I have here, right? And so let's work around maybe this periscope. And again, you're trying to simulate, you're trying to put the dirt where the dirt would logically get. And in this case, it would logically get up here really from foot traffic from the crew getting on and off the vehicle into the hatches and whatnot. And I've got this nice big bright American star here, but don't be afraid of, in fact, you want to kind of tone that down a bit, right? Because you can see here the contrast between where we have some mud and where we don't, and this is quite bright, right? So, which is okay, but don't be afraid to go over it. So I'm just going to very randomly just apply a couple of dollops of this light mud color. And don't be worried, that's a little bit big, but don't be worried, you can certainly work with that. And then let me just continue that process here, maybe around here, maybe a little bit in here, right, where some dirt would kind of accumulate and come down. Maybe a little bit further in here. Right, and it's very random. Like to be honest, I haven't put a lot of thought into this. The less thought I put into things, the better generally. Get some of the darker color, just kind of mix that in. Just like that. I don't need a lot. And you don't want it mixed in, like you could mix these two colors together, but then it becomes a little bit too uniform. You want a very kind of random effect. And when you get that random varied effect, that really adds life to the vehicle, I think, to the model. So you can see not a lot of paint on there. So I'm going to use a different brush. Now this is where I bring in the this is the Abteilung 502 matte effect thinner. And the reason why I like to use this is there is a matte, so this is thinner, this is odorless thinner, but it has a matte additive added to it. And you can see it's kind of, compared to the odorless thinner, it's kind of cloudy. So that's the matte additive in there. And the reason why I like to use this is because it dries absolutely flat. And I'll just dip that in there. You just want to get the brush. You want to unload the brush a little bit and just start stippling. And you can see how, so in this one in particular, there was a bit of a, so let's unload the brush a bit. And just start blending this in. It took me a long time to figure this out, but the art to blending is stippling. So just stipple that. See how you're kind of diffusing and just work it out maybe. And again, the nice thing about this is if you don't like where this is going, you can just take it off with the thinner. But so far so good here. And some logic comes into this, right? So for example, the crew aren't going to step, or they shouldn't. They shouldn't be stepping on the. They would try to avoid these periscope covers here, right? So don't work the mud into there. Leave those kind of alone, and just work around it where the crew would naturally kind of step around it. And you can see already here, there's a nice diffused effect. I'll just go in there and maybe just preserve that. Kind of that panel line there. Well, it's not really a panel line, but that gap in there. All right, just diffuse and see how very easy that is. I'll work into these other areas here. And then you can also work in some streaking, kind of on the fly streaking. As you would have mud, rain would hit it, and again follow the direction of gravity. The only thing with this thinner is you do have to mix it up regularly because the matte additive tends to settle. But just kind of work that in. Very easy.
And I'll be honest with you, this is absolutely my favorite part of the build. Well, it's not really building, but my favorite part of the whole process of putting a model together. Because this is where, in my mind, things really come to life. This is where you start to develop the story of the vehicle. Mike Rinaldi talks about that a lot in his when he gives seminars. Is what are you trying to, what is your weathering saying about where the vehicle has been, what it's gone through, what's happened to the crew, right? If you think along those lines, I think you kind of end up going and coming up with things that maybe you might not have thought of before. And I think it's absolutely great. He's absolutely right there. So again, there would be some dirt and dust accumulation down here. And again, you can work in a bit of a streaking effect if you wanted to. And you can see how by blending, all I'm doing is I'm just stippling. Right? I'm just dabbing, with a slightly moistened brush, moving the oil paint around. And you can see here, you can see just a slight hint of the darker mud color. And it's a nice little random effect there. And I think for doing this type of, simulating dirt and mud and earth on a vehicle, I think the oil paints are the way to go, because they're very controllable. If you don't like where it's going, it's easy to pull off. You have a whole wide variety of color to work with. Certainly the hobby manufacturers make it very easy for you to do this with all of the colors and different products that they offer to do this. I mean, you could use, if you wanted to, you could use something like this too. You could use like a dark mud effect, like the Earth Effects, which are, slightly thicker enamel products. And you can do the same type of thing where you work them in and then you kind of stipple and blend them out. That would work just as fine too. Might be a tad quicker than what we're doing here. And you can see here, just start to work that, just start streaking that down. As you get to the edge, and just start to... Okay, and you can see very quickly, with just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of oil paint and some stippling action, that you've got a nice effect here. Very subtle. And again, with this, you can work it in. Nice little streaking there. Maybe bring some here. No, I think they would kind of stay away from obviously there wouldn't be a lot of mud and dirt here on the mantle or the gun, so we'll leave that kind of as is, and it adds a nice bit of contrast. Now you've got a bit of contrast between the outer mantle and the inner, where you have this come down. And shake that up a bit. So I'm just going to continue stippling this out. Again, I can work down some streaks here. Very subtly. And if I wanted to, maybe here, go back and add a little bit more streaking. And then come back and blend it with the moistened brush. And again, if you don't like it, you can just take it all off. Now, if you wanted to use maybe a bit of a different brush to blend it. Yeah, maybe a slightly bigger one. And the important thing is to take off, oops. There you go. And just blend it in like that. Very subtly. Kind of like rain marks almost. So now what I can do is with a much smaller brush, and you can, and I got this is kind of a weathering brush that's already kind of cut off here, but any old, like at some point this brush is going to get, you're going to get the same type of treatment. I'm going to cut that down. You can use it as a nice, fine applicator for pigment. So I'll just go back, again, the same pigment mixture I was using for the tracks, go pick some up, and just start dropping it. Just start dabbing it right into the oil. So the oil is still wet for the most part. Just to add, and you see how it right there just adds a little bit more. There's a little bit more texture, a slightly different color to it, consistent with what's happening on the rest of the vehicle. And again, you probably have a lot of you got to think, where's the foot traffic going to be on the vehicle, right? Get out of there, just work it in there. And again, don't, kind of leave this part here, the inner part of this periscope cover, leave it unaffected. Just work around it, and again, it creates a nice little feature where that kind of stands out. Kind of a clean area and an island of mud and dirt. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's go work just a little bit of the pigment in. Don't need a lot. Just work it in like that. This just adds another, and we talk about layering, right? So this is exactly what you're doing here. So you're just layering more effect on. Do it in random areas. And I think that looks pretty good. And maybe just get some, let's work some here. And maybe just kind of work that down the side, very subtly. And again, don't bother fixing this. No need to risk ruining the finish or creating tide or pool marks with, we're trying to put some pigment fixture on here. The oils will do that. We'll hold it in place. We got a very nice effect here. There you go. Some of the previous work I did here, I did the same type of streaking here. All right, so you can still see there's some after effects of the streaking here. If you wanted to go back and do it a little bit more aggressively, you could. Maybe let's add a dark streak in there. All right, you're just kind of touching it with the oils, like so. And you can kind of blend it in with a larger brush, just to soften it a bit. Just to give a little little area of interest here, and you can. There you go. Very subtle. No streak is too subtle. It's like no scratch is too small. There you have it. So in a short little while, we added some pigment and some oils in and around the top of the vehicle. Again, there'd be a lot of crew getting in and out, walking on top here, and then we'll do the same thing on the rest of the vehicle. Let me grab the hull bit here, but see, very nice realistic effect. And I like the contrast here. I like where part of the star is bright, and part of it is hidden, right? So there's no there's no prejudice, as it were, in terms of I just spent a lot of time putting that decal down. I don't want to cover it. No, you do want to cover it. You absolutely want to work it. If it's in an area where there's going to be logical accumulation of dirt and mud and whatnot, cover it up. And I just think it looks that much more realistic. So I think that's it for the turret. Let's maybe do another section on the hull here. So let's do, again, you would have, let's do this section here. So I'd done this one previously. I haven't done this one, and the reason why I haven't done this one is this is a service hatch that would be used for getting at the engine. And I think a lot of the times, if there was activity back here servicing this would flip up, and you won't have the opportunity to get dirt and stuff on it. So I've left this alone. I might come back and do just a little bit, but let's do, because there's a lot of tools and whatnot here, so the crew would maybe stay away from this, but here there's a pretty flat surface, they go on this, so let's do the same type of thing here. So again, using the same color palette, go in, you pick up I'll pick up some of the light mud. There's light mud. I was trying to remember my colors here. And again, work within the panel. Right? So if we're saying that we're kind of going to go easy on this because there'll be less foot traffic here because this is a service hatch for the engine, work your way up to the edge of that. Right? So just like that. There probably wouldn't be a lot of foot traffic back here. Maybe a little bit down. Let's add some of the darker color in there. Right, just little bits. And do the same type of thing with a smaller brush, the matte. Mix it up a bit. Unload it. And same type of thing, do your stippling action here. And all you're trying to do is you're just trying to diffuse things. Just work it gently. There's a bit of there. Again, working your way up to that natural panel line there. And you can see that, like on this one that I did here, you can see the contrast. I think that's a really nice looking effect. Get some more thinner. Again, not too much, because if you pick up too much, this will just turn into one big runny mess. Just like that. And again, you got the nice random colors. You got the light mud and the dark mud. All right, work it around, work it down. Again, if you wanted to do some streaking, pick up a little bit more of the thinner. Again, you see how I'm unloading it on this paper towel? And you can start bringing that, streaking that down there. Nice subtle effect. Now, sometimes people have very specific ideas of what they want to do for weathering. I don't. I mean, I have a general idea of the effects I'm looking for, but see, here we got a little bit of the oil paint on this panel, but you see how easy it is to fix up? Like it was never there. And again, you don't have to do the whole panel. Like, I would focus on this part here, this area here. Give it a nice random effect. And you can see how there's differences, right? You can see where there was more of the dark mud oil paint versus the light mud. It's a nice random. So I think that's good. Now, you could leave it like that. I'm just going to go after it with a little bit of the pigments. Just a bit, not as much as maybe I did on the top of the turret. I just pick some up and just maybe work some in. And I really like the effect this gives because it adds gives it a bit of texture, a very slight bit of texture. You don't want a lot. And it's just another effect. And you see I'm just, again, stippling with this little cut-off brush. Same type of thing, just kind of working it in. And again, leaving this relatively clean. And I think that's it for that. So see how quickly we did that one little section? Very easy to do, gives a nice convincing finish. You can do that in other sections. I wouldn't do every single one. You want to, otherwise it just looks too uniform. I think the fact that you're creating different areas of interest on the vehicle when somebody's looking at your model, the eyes are going to be drawn there, and that's really what you want to do. I think a sure telltale sign of a nicely executed model in terms of the build and the finish is if you're able to draw people's eyes. And Dave tells me this all the time, and he's absolutely right. If you can get somebody looking at your vehicle and they look at a different, look at the mud here, or look at this tool here, or look at this panel here, and their eyes stay on it and they're seeing something a little bit different the more they look at it, then to me, I think you've accomplished your mission. So very simple to do. We'll do a few more areas, but I'll do that off camera. But I think, with what we did on the turret and what we did on this one panel here, it's exactly what I did here on the first part that I did off camera. Very easy to do, and you can see you can build up a very nice simple effect just with some oil paints, some thinner, and some pigments. You can build a nice random realistic looking effect. So now we'll do the last little bit for today's session. We'll be just doing some oil and grease stains. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to do oil and grease stains on the running gear. And I've done this side, so I've added kind of a stain here. I've added another one here and one here. So again, you don't want to do it in every single one because it kind of takes the effect away. But I'll show you how to do it on the other side where I haven't applied any yet. So what I like to do is I like to use, and in this particular case, well, before I talk about the specific products, I think it's important that you get, there's three components that I like to add or like to bring together to make these types of things happen. So thinner, some type of gloss medium, and color. And in this case, what I did is for the gloss medium, again, this murky water, this product from Wild, this is amazing stuff. If you can find it, grab it. It's a great effect. And I mean, you look at it, it screams as murky water. It does stink. There's a pretty powerful odor to this, but it does a great job. And I think you could probably get the same type of thing with the wet effects or even an enamel gloss type of thing. But I like this. It's nice. It's thick. It dries absolutely glossy, and I think it's a great additive. And then for color, in this case, I use two different colors. I use the old grease, which is kind of like a dark brown, and I use the diesel exhaust run effect, which is kind of almost like a black blue.
Definitely we'll be working this into future builds for doing diesel exhausts on maybe some German Armour, maybe the Brumbar that I'm going to be doing next. But it's a great color. So I've mixed them together with some odorless thinner here. And what I like to do is just take some with a brush. Just pick some up and just pick a random wheel here. And let's say, I don't know, let's say that one's saying, hey, and just touch it. And let the capillary action do its thing. Maybe run it into the bottom here, just so and you can see how it gets pulled into, there's dried pigments on here, you can see how it gets pulled into the thing. You get a nice, now this is thin, you could apply these effects right out of the bottle, but I like to apply them bit by bit to build up a finish. And the reason for doing that is and just show you the front of the vehicle. So you see this wet stain here on the front here. So that was built up in very much the same way, but I'm using successive layers, just touching, dabbling it on to create different consistencies of the gloss, excuse me, the gloss finish. So you can see here, it's still a little bit wet, it's a little bit more glossy, and then as it draws down into the mud and the dirt underneath, it's maybe more of a matte finish, not quite as glossy. And I think layering that in, if you do it all at once with a product right out of the bottle, it's going to be the same finish throughout. So if you build it up, I think you get much more of a varied and realistic finish. It takes a little bit more time, there's more of an investment in it, but I think the payoff is huge in terms of the final effect. So, but for doing the stains here, it's a little bit, especially for something small like this, you can see already, just in the time that I applied this and was talking about the stain in the front, you can see here where we added, this is a little bit matte, and there's a little bit more glossy here where you have more concentrate. So again, you can go back in and just build up the finish. So I might do another thing there. Maybe don't take it out as far here. Right, very subtle. We can do maybe something on the front, even though we kind of did it on the other side here. But maybe just to show, for the purposes of demonstration here. Again, you can do a nice, maybe there's a bit of a leak here. Gets out. Now, don't forget, you have to factor in, here there's no, because this is a stationary piece, there's really no centripetal action to factor in, just really gravity. So as this leaks, it'll kind of fall into this area here. But if you're doing it on a road wheel or a sprocket, you do have to factor in the centripetal action. So if you think about it, so as oil or a stain gets on there, because this is constantly moving in a circular motion, it's going to start, the centripetal force is going to pull it out. So it's going to work its way out, right? Like that. So even though the stain originates here, for our example, because you're constantly moving, centripetal force is going to pull that out towards the edges. All that physics I took in high school finally paid off. There you go, just add a little bit more and just kind of work the effect in. And there would be a natural tendency to accumulate. And you can see how I didn't actually go to these areas here, just the natural leaching action of the effect, and the pigments kind of pull it out. And and in my mind, that's a natural effect. I'm not fussed by that at all. I think that's great. That's a happy accident. So again, on this sprocket here, it's had a chance to dry a little bit, add a little bit, just more around where the grease would naturally accumulate. And so you're not only creating different densities of color, you're also creating different densities of gloss finish. Just like on the front here. All right, different densities of color, different densities of gloss finish. Go back here, maybe let's add a little bit more on the top.
the side. Very, very subtle. Maybe do another. No, I'm not an expert on the mechanics of the bogies here or the suspension system, but let's say maybe here there's a bit of a, right? They would keep everything nice and greased up so that they would avoid corrosion, I'm guessing. I just have that kind of, all right, and maybe a bit of a dab here. Just random, right? Same type of thing. This would leak down. I can touch that. Let's go see how our drive sprocket's doing here. Not too bad. Let's just add just a little bit more gloss, or a little bit more product here. Again, it's going to build up the intensity of the color and the gloss finish. And there you have it. So just a few simple, again, don't overdo it. Don't do it on every single one because that just kind of ruins the effect. To be honest, I might, I'm kind of showing it on different spots here, but I might just do it on one or two. But it is a nice effect. So use it, do use it sparingly, otherwise it becomes too much. So there you have it. I think the build is materially done, and I hope there's still a few more things to do. So I'll finish maybe some of the mud and the weathering process on the horizontal surfaces here. Maybe go in here a little bit more, finish up here, and again, it's just you're trying to bring everything together, right? So the lower half of the vehicle is going to get pounded with mud and dirt as it travels through various different types of terrain. The upper portions of the vehicle are going to get mud and dirt by virtue of dirt being thrown up onto the vehicle by way of explosions or large splashes or crew movement. So kind of work that into your thinking, and do work it in, because if you have a clean upper part of the vehicle and a very dirty lower part, doesn't quite look right. So do kind of bring that up. It's easy to forget about that. I've certainly done that in the past, but do be conscientious about working that into the upper reaches of the vehicle. So I'll glue the parts of the track down to the bogies here to get that similar to what we have on the other side of the vehicle. And then I think we're materially done. So we'll look at working this into the groundwork that Dave's putting together in his series of videos, and I think we're done. And I hope it was certainly very enjoyable for me doing this. I love spending time here with Robert and Dave doing these videos. I hope you guys took something away from it. Certainly look forward to doing more. Working on different topics and doing different tips. So if anybody has any suggestions and things that they want to see, please let us know in the comments section, and we'll look at working those into future videos. Thanks very much. Have a great day.